For a moment, the silence was worse than the noise. The Mingyue Estate had always breathed with a pulse of life. Maids whispering in corridors, cooks clattering in the kitchens, Xiao Rui's laughter or tantrums echoing across the gardens. But now, in the early dawn hours, it felt like the house was holding its breath. Imani sat on the edge of her bed, her fingers tracing the embroidered sheets, listening to the distant cry of a crane outside. Sleep had been fitful, haunted by Xu Liang's words from the night before and the weight of her own confusion. She had never expected her life to entangle with a man like him. He was cold steel wrapped in silk, precise in every gesture, powerful in every glance. Yet beneath that hard exterior, she had seen something. A flicker of weariness in his eyes, the way he lingered outside Xiao Rui's door late at night when he thought no one was watching. And there was the boy. Xiao Rui had begun to soften toward her. It wasn't immediate, not like flipping a switch. But the night terrors that had kept him thrashing and screaming seemed to quiet when Imani sat by his bed, stroking his hair, humming the lullabies her own mother used to sing. He had clutched her hand last night until he finally drifted into slumber, and in that moment, she felt something inside her chest unravel. Now, in the pale light of dawn, she wasn't sure what frightened her more, her growing attachment to the boy, or the way Xu Liang's presence unsettled her heart. The day stretched out before her with a rhythm that was slowly becoming familiar. Xiao Rui's lessons with his tutor, Imani's responsibilities as his nanny, the subtle glances of the staff as they passed her in the hallways. Their whispers had sharpened over the past few days. She's not like the others. Did you see the way Master Xu looked at her? She'll bring trouble. Mark my words. The Mingyue Estate thrived on secrets, and Imani was beginning to realize that her arrival had stirred waters that had long been still. In the garden, Xiao Rui sulked on a stone bench, refusing to touch the abacus placed before him. The tutor, a thin, impatient man with spectacles perched on his nose, tapped the wooden frame in irritation. Young master, this is not acceptable. Numbers will shape your future. Discipline begins here. Xiao Rui's lips pressed into a stubborn line. His small fists clenched at his sides. Imani crouched beside him, lowering her voice to a whisper. You don't like the abacus? The boy shook his head. Then tell me, she said gently, what do you see when you move the beads? Do they remind you of anything? Xiao Rui's eyes flickered with curiosity. He hesitated, then whispered, stars. Her smile bloomed before she could stop it. Then count the stars for me. One by one. Maybe together, we'll build a sky. The boy's resistance softened. Slowly, he began sliding the beads across, his small voice counting under his breath. The tutor blinked, astonished at the sudden change. Imani only kept her eyes on Xiao Rui, her heart swelling as she saw his shoulders ease. Later, when Xu Liang found them beneath the peach blossoms, he stood silently for a long time, watching the way Xiao Rui clung to Imani's sleeve, laughing as though laughter had always come easily to him. Xu Liang's expression was unreadable, but something passed across his face, something that unsettled Imani more than she cared to admit. That evening, a storm rolled across the mountains. Rain hammered the tiled roofs, lightning carved the sky into jagged fragments. The Mingyue Estate glowed with lantern light, but the storm seemed to seep through the walls, making every shadow deeper. Imani had just finished putting Xiao Rui to bed when she heard footsteps in the corridor. Heavy. Controlled. They stopped outside her door. She opened it to find Xu Liang standing there, his black suit damp from the rain, his hair slicked back. His presence filled the hallway like thunder. You've done well with him, he said, his voice low. Better than anyone else has managed. Imani swallowed, unsure what to say. He just needs patience. And someone to listen. His gaze lingered on her, searching, weighing. Patience is not a luxury many in this house can afford. There was a heaviness in his words, as though he was speaking not just of Xiao Rui, but of himself. Before she could reply, another sound broke through the storm, the faint creak of footsteps in the wing beyond. Xu Liang stiffened. His eyes darkened. Stay here, he ordered. But Imani's instincts screamed against it. She followed him, silent as his shadow, down the hallway. The air smelled faintly of smoke, though no lanterns burned here. Xu Liang pushed open a door to one of the unused wings, and what they found froze Imani's blood. Two men stood by the window, speaking in hushed Mandarin. One held a small leather folder, the other pointed to the estate grounds beyond, where lightning lit the gardens in stark flashes. Xu Liang's voice was colder than the storm. "You shouldn't be here." The men stiffened, turning slowly. Imani's heart lurched as she saw the glint of a blade at one man's belt. "Master Xu," the taller one said smoothly, "we only came to deliver a message." Xu Liang stepped forward, his presence filling the room with dangerous calm. "You've delivered it. Now get out before I decide patience is no longer a virtue." The men hesitated, then slipped out into the storm, leaving behind the faint smell of tobacco and something darker: fear. Imani turned to Xu Liang, her breath unsteady. "Who were they?" His jaw tightened. "No one you need to concern yourself with." But she had seen the look in his eyes, the flicker of recognition, the shadow of an old wound opening. Later that night, when the estate had gone quiet again, Imani couldn't sleep. She wandered the halls, her footsteps soft against the polished wood. Something pulled her toward Xu Liang's private study, a room she had never been allowed to enter. The door was ajar. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of sandalwood and ink. Papers were strewn across the desk, maps with red markings, photographs clipped to files. Imani's eyes widened as she leaned closer. One photograph stopped her cold. It was Xu Liang, 10 years younger, standing in a foreign city, his arms slung around a man she didn't recognize. Both of them smiling. Carefree. But in the file beside the photo, the man's face was circled in red. Beneath it, in bold letters, was a single word: deceased. Imani's blood ran cold. Before she could move, she heard the sound of a door closing softly behind her. Xu Liang's voice came like the edge of a blade. "You shouldn't be here." Her heart lurched. She turned, words tangled on her tongue. But it wasn't his anger that froze her, it was his eyes. Dark. Haunted. Almost desperate. And in that moment, she realized the truth. Xu Liang was hiding something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Something that could destroy not just him, but everyone who lived under the roof of the Mingyue Estate. The silence in Xu Liang's study was suffocating. Imani stood frozen, the photograph still in her hand, her breath shallow as if the air itself had turned against her. Xu Liang's figure loomed in the doorway, shadows from the lanterns stretching his presence across the room until it felt as though there was no escape. "You shouldn't be here," he repeated, his voice rougher this time, stripped of its usual composure. Imani swallowed hard, her fingers trembling as she placed the photograph back on the desk. I didn't mean. Don't lie to me." His eyes flashed like a blade catching firelight. "You wanted to know more. You always want to know more." Her lips parted, the words torn between defense and fear. "Because you hide everything. Even from your son. Even from yourself." The words slipped out before she could stop them. For a moment, the room went so still she could hear her own heartbeat. Xu Liang stepped closer, every line of his body taut, controlled, except his eyes, which burned with a storm he couldn't contain. "You will forget what you saw tonight," he said, each syllable like stone. "For your own sake. For Xiao Rui's sake." The invocation of the boy's name struck her deeper than his anger. "Are you threatening me?" His jaw tightened. "I am protecting you." Her breath caught. Protecting. The word rattled inside her chest, colliding with the image of the dead man's face circled in red. If Xu Liang believed danger lurked even within his own walls, what did that mean for her? For the child she was charged to guard? "Then tell me the truth," Imani whispered, her voice breaking. "Who was he?" Xu Liang's expression shifted, just for an instant. Something raw, something wounded, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "Go back to your room, Imani. Do not ask again." She wanted to fight, to demand answers, but something in his voice stopped her. It wasn't just authority, it was despair. So she turned, her footsteps echoing hollowly against the wooden floor, and left the study. But as she walked away, she knew the fragile trust between them had cracked. The next morning, the estate felt different. The storm had passed, leaving the air thick and heavy, but the people of the Mingyue Estate seemed restless. Whispers carried through the halls, servants moving quickly as though afraid of being caught idle. Even Xiao Rui, usually quick to demand her attention, sat silently at breakfast, pushing his rice porridge around his bowl without eating. When Imani asked if he was all right, he only muttered, "Boba's angry." The words chilled her. Xu Liang was many things: cold, calculating, unreadable, but Xiao Rui sensed him in ways no one else could. If the boy felt the storm still rumbling inside his father, it was only a matter of time before the whole house did. Later that day, as she guided Xiao Rui through his lessons, 2 guards entered the classroom. Their dark suits were immaculate, their expressions unreadable. "Master Su requests your presence," one of them said, his gaze fixed on Imani. Xiao Rui immediately clung to her hand. "No. Don't go." Imani bent down, brushing his hair back gently. "I'll be back soon. I promise." But her chest ached as she followed the guards through the maze of corridors. Every step brought her closer to the unknown, her mind spinning with possibilities. Xu Liang was waiting for her in one of the inner courtyards, beneath the shade of an ancient pine. He wasn't alone. Another man stood with him, a stranger in a grey suit, his face sharp, his eyes cold. "This is Mr. Han," Xu Liang said curtly. "An associate." The man's gaze raked over Imani, measuring, dissecting. "So this is the woman everyone whispers about." His Mandarin was smooth, but his tone cut like glass. "Interesting." Imani's stomach tightened. She glanced at Xu Liang, searching for any sign of reassurance, but his face was carved in stone. Mr. Han smiled faintly. "I hear you've been good with the boy. Better than most. That takes talent." His words carried an edge she didn't understand, but Xu Liang interrupted before she could respond. "That's enough." His voice was firm, laced with warning. "You have what you came for. Leave." Mr. Han's eyes lingered on her a moment longer, then flicked back to Xu Liang. "Be careful, Liang. Attachments make men weak. You know this better than anyone." With that, he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing like a verdict. Imani exhaled shakily once he was gone. Who was that? "No one you need to concern yourself with." The same words again. The same wall. Her frustration bubbled over. "Every time I ask, you shut me out. But what happens when your secrets start bleeding into Xiao Rui's life? Into mine?" For the first time, Xu Liang's mask cracked. He stepped closer, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. "Then you will understand why I told you not to ask." Their eyes locked, and the space between them vibrated with something neither of them wanted to name. Fear, longing, defiance. That night, Imani tried to settle Xiao Rui into bed, but the boy refused to sleep. His small fists clutched her sleeve tightly. "Something bad is coming," he whispered. Her heart twisted. "What do you mean?" He shook his head, burying his face against her. "I heard them. In the garden. They said Boba will fall." Imani's blood turned to ice. She wanted to comfort him, to tell him it was just a dream, but the terror in his eyes was too real. And then, from outside the window, she caught it, the faint glow of a cigarette, hovering in the darkness beyond the peach trees. Someone was watching the Mingyue Estate. Imani's nights grew restless after that. She began noticing things she hadn't before. The way the guards rotated in pairs, the coded glances between the staff, the locked doors in corridors she had once been free to roam. The estate was no longer just a home. It was a fortress. And fortresses always had enemies. On the 4th night after discovering the photograph, she heard raised voices drifting from Xu Liang's study. She knew she should walk away, but her feet betrayed her. She pressed herself against the wall, listening. Han is pushing too far, Xu Liang's voice, low and furious. A second voice, unfamiliar, answered sharply. You've let your emotions compromise you. That woman, the nanny, she is becoming a liability. Imani's breath caught. They were talking about her. Leave her out of this, Xu Liang snapped. She knows nothing. She knows enough. And if you won't handle it, someone else will. The words dropped like a blade, followed by the slam of a door. Imani staggered back, her pulse racing. She should have felt relief that Xu Liang had defended her. Instead, she felt the cold grip of dread. Because if someone else decided to handle her, what chance would she have inside a house full of secrets? So she turned, her footsteps echoing hollowly against the wooden floor, and left the study. But as she walked away, she knew the fragile trust between them had cracked. That night, her mind would not quiet. Images of the circled face, the bold word deceased, and Xu Liang's haunted eyes swirled through her head. She paced her room, her stomach twisting, nausea rising with every thought. At first, she thought it was nerves. But the wave grew stronger, her body trembling. She rushed to the basin in the corner, retching violently until her throat burned. Her vision blurred, black spots dancing at the edges. She tried to steady herself against the wall, but her knees buckled. The last thing she felt was the cool wood against her cheek as the room tilted sideways and everything went dark. The first thing Imani became aware of was the muffled sound of voices. They tugged at her from the darkness she was drowning in, faint but persistent. Slowly, the haze lifted, and when she blinked her eyes open, she was met with the white expanse of the Mingyue Estate's private clinic. The scent of antiseptics stung her nose. Xu Liang was there, standing stiffly by the window, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. But his eyes, dark, restless, worried, were fixed on her the moment she stirred. You're awake, he said, his voice low, almost strained. Imani swallowed hard, her throat dry. What happened? You fainted, Xu Liang replied. He hesitated, then added, the doctor ran some tests. A silence stretched between them. The air seemed too heavy, pressing against her chest. She could feel it before he said it, like her body already knew. You're pregnant. The words hit her like a thunderclap. Her heart stumbled in her chest, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. Pregnant. The room spun again, but she forced herself to focus. Imani's lips trembled. I can explain. Xu Liang's jaw tightened, his fingers flexing at his sides. For a heartbeat, his silence was worse than anger. Then he stepped forward, eyes locked on hers, and said, then explain. Tell me everything. Her hands clenched the sheets. This was the moment she had dreaded, the secret she had buried so deep she wished it had died there. But now it demanded air. She twisted her fingers together, the words fighting to stay buried but knowing they couldn't any longer. Back in college. I went for a routine checkup at the hospital near campus. It was supposed to be nothing serious, just blood work, a physical, the kind of thing everyone does. Her breath hitched. But something happened. Without my consent, without even my knowledge at the time. They artificially inseminated me. The air thickened between them. Junjie's expression hardened, his jaw tightening, but he didn't interrupt. I didn't even realize until months later, Zaraya continued, her voice cracking. When I went back to demand answers, the hospital refused to explain how it happened or whose semen they used. They shut me out, told me nothing. It was like hitting a wall. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks now. I couldn't face my family. How could I return home with a baby I couldn't explain? So I stayed. I took whatever work I could find, became a nanny, just to survive. Her confession hung in the air, heavy and raw. For a moment, the only sound was her uneven breathing. Junjie's hand flexed at his side, as though he were resisting the urge to punch something, or someone. Finally, he exhaled slowly, his gaze softening as it locked onto hers. "You're telling me this wasn't your choice?" "It wasn't," she whispered. "I swear it." For the first time, something in his posture shifted. His usual cold, unyielding control cracked, revealing a flicker of compassion beneath. He reached out, cupping her trembling hand in his. "I believe you." Zariah blinked up at him, startled. "You do?" His eyes burned with a quiet intensity. "Yes. And whoever did this to you will answer for it. I won't let this go." The conviction in his voice wrapped around her like armor, steadying her in a way she hadn't expected. For months, she had carried this secret alone, suffocated by fear and shame. Now, for the first time, she wasn't alone. "We'll find the truth," Junjie said firmly. "But first, we need to be certain about the child. A DNA test will tell us what we're dealing with, and maybe point us toward the answers they've tried to hide." The next day, Xu Liang arranged for a DNA test. Imani sat in the clinic, her hands shaking as the samples were taken, each prick of the needle like a reminder of the questions that shadowed her life. Was the child his? Was it someone else's? Was she the strange woman he had been looking for? The one that disappeared without a trace. Xu Liang stayed beside her through it all, his expression unreadable but his presence unwavering. When the results were sealed in an envelope and placed in the doctor's hand, neither of them reached for it immediately. The weight of it was too great. Instead, they sat side by side in silence, the envelope on the table between them like a bomb waiting to detonate. The unanswered questions hung in the air, thick, suffocating, endless. Imani clasped her hands over her stomach, her breath unsteady. Xu Liang's gaze flicked to her, then back to the envelope. They were no longer just fighting whispers and shadows. They were standing at the edge of a truth that could either bind them together or rip everything apart. And as the night deepened outside the clinic, they waited, for answers, for justice, for a future neither of them could yet see.